Mr. President. And Mr. President, as some of my colleagues know, nearly every month for more than a year now, I've come to the Senate floor regularly to highlight the diverse and difficult work performed by the men and women at the Department of Homeland Security. I've been privileged to be, at times, in recent years, the chairman of the Senate Committee on Homeland Security and Governmental Affairs, and today serve as the senior Democrat, the ranking member of that committee. The Department of Homeland Security is part of the government that we have direct jurisdiction over, and it's one that it's a great privilege to work with them and to have an opportunity to oversee the operation of that department. But the Department of Homeland Security has more than 230,000 employees stationed around our country, at our ports of entry, our major transit hubs, and in major cities and small communities alike. Each day, Department of Homeland Security employees perform some of the most challenging jobs in the federal government, from securing radiological materials to protecting our cyber networks to responding to natural disasters such as floods, fires, and tornadoes. The Department of Homeland Security employees work around the clock to stay ahead of the threats to our communities, to our homes, and to our families. I commend their Secretary Jay Johnson, Deputy Secretary Ali Mayorkas, and their entire leadership team for their continued efforts to bring the department together and to make the Department of Homeland Security more than just the sum of its parts. In fact, last week, the 2016 Federal Employee Viewpoint Survey was released with some good news. This annual survey is provided to hundreds of thousands of federal employees every year to gauge their satisfaction with their jobs and their engagement with their agency as a whole. After 6 years of declining morale numbers, the tide has begun to turn at the Department of Homeland Security, and that's a good thing. Since last year, morale has increased overall throughout the department by some 3%. I believe that's probably more than any other department in the federal government over the last year. It's a significant one-year improvement. And again, a better result than the federal government average over the same period. But like turning an aircraft carrier, an old Navy term, improving morale at such a large, diverse federal agency takes some time. You can turn an aircraft carrier, of course, but it takes a little while. And so does changing the morale, improving the morale at a big department with 250,000 people spread out all over the world. But I believe this latest survey shows that the hard work done by Secretary Johnson, Deputy Secretary Mayorkas, and their team has begun to put this ship on a better course for the future. And while more work needs to be done to improve morale at the Department of Homeland Security, this effort does not fall on Secretary Johnson alone. Each member of Congress and every American can help support the department and its employees by simply acknowledge the good work that the employees there do every day. Whether we simply say thank you to a TSA agent, a TSO officer, the next time we pass through an airport, or give an occasional speech on the Senate floor like I'm doing tonight and have done on other occasions, our support makes a difference. Mr. President, each September, the Federal Emergency Management Agency, which we affectionately call FEMA, marks National Preparedness Month. And throughout the month, FEMA encourages all Americans to prepare for natural disasters and emergencies. To continue highlighting National Preparedness Month and to recognize the important life-saving work done by FEMA and its people, I want to take a moment tonight to thank just a few of the employees at FEMA, one of the 22 component agencies all told that make up the Department of Homeland Security. As my colleagues may know, just last month, historic flooding inundated much of the state of Louisiana. And what some may not know is that even before the floodwaters had peaked, FEMA employees and personnel were on the ground there. They were setting up incident support bases to provide supplies, coordinating with state and local officials, and supporting first responders in rescue efforts. FEMA also set up disaster recovery centers to assist residents seeking federal aid to get back on their feet in the aftermath of this storm. One of the first FEMA employees on the ground there more than a month ago was a fellow named Justo Hernandez. And Justo Hernandez's picture is right here. Justo, who goes by the nickname Tito, is a team leader of the East 2 National Incident Management Assistance Team. With 28 years of experience with FEMA, Tito leads his team in immediate response efforts to natural and man-made disasters whenever and wherever they occur. Ready at a moment's notice, Tito and his team are experts in disaster response, specializing in operations and logistics and planning and in recovery. They put their experience to use by supporting state and local officials as they work through the most trying of situations. The members of Tito's team say that he is by far the best manager and supervisor they have ever worked for. And as a leader, Tito leads by example, not afraid to get his hands dirty, never turning down a task, large or small. With their team expected to be deployed nearly 9 months out of the year, Tito has a deep respect for his team members' personal time. And when Tito does get some time back at home, I know he enjoys spending every moment with his wife and their 3 children. His family is incredibly generous, and we are grateful to you, if you happen to be listening, for lending our nation your husband and your father so that he may undertake his important work in many parts of America on behalf of all Americans. As a FEMA employee, Tito embodies the spirit and the dedication and caring, shaking hands with each individual he comes into contact with, asking them, "How are you doing?" As with most of the men and women at FEMA, Tito doesn't just stop there with asking that question. He then goes on to do all that he and his colleagues can do to help people. Last month, I visited FEMA headquarters here in Washington, D.C. I met a number of the thousands of dedicated employees who work there. Got a picture here from that FEMA visit where I'm talking with some of the exceptional people who work and really serve us and help us in some of our darkest hours. While many of these men and women are not directly involved in the response effort in Louisiana, they felt obliged to do all they could for their colleagues who were on the ground in Louisiana or coordinating from around the country. In fact, FEMA headquarters established a backup call center in their offices, and dozens of FEMA employees volunteered during and after their regular working hours to man the phones and talk to people through some of the toughest situations imaginable. One FEMA employee who asked how she could help was Melissa Forbes. Melissa has a PhD in public policy and serves as this Director of Enterprise Resource Planning in FEMA's Office of Policy and Program Analysis. Melissa's day job is to ensure that FEMA has the resources needed for challenges it expects to face in the months and years ahead. But for 27 hours over the course of 5 days, that's more than 5 hours a day, Melissa put her regular work on hold and came to the call center. And in those 27 hours, Melissa took countless calls, answering questions, connecting people with her colleagues at FEMA who could get them immediate help. In the Navy, when someone does a truly remarkable job, we say these words, "Bravo, Zulu." And so to Melissa, to all with whom you work and volunteer with at FEMA headquarters, I would just say a great big Bravo, Zulu. As I mentioned earlier, Mr. President, FEMA is made up of thousands of men and women who ask every day, "How are you? How are you doing? And how can we help?" And while Tito, his team, and others from FEMA were on the ground in Louisiana, Melissa felt compelled to do all that she could do to support them. More than a year ago, Secretary Johnson launched his Unity of Effort initiative to bring the Department of Homeland Security employers closer together in their shared mission. Last month, Melissa and Tito were united from 1,000 miles away in their efforts to help the people of Louisiana. And every month I come to the Senate floor and highlight the amazing dedication of 2 or 3 people, in some cases entire teams of men and women, who are united in their shared goal of keeping Americans safe. In closing, let me just say, I don't think the results from this year's federal Viewpoint survey are a fluke. I believe the improvement in morale that's been reported by hundreds of employees of the Department of Homeland Security, actually thousands, I think they represent the growing unity within the Department of Homeland Security, the youngest and 3rd largest cabinet department in the federal government. And I, for one, look forward to next year's Viewpoint survey, as well as to those in the years to come, because I believe they will continue to put on display an ever more united and effective department. So to Tito, to the East 2 team, to Melissa, the volunteers at FEMA headquarters, as well as to everyone at FEMA, we say a great big thank you. Thank you for coming together, not only to ask, how are you doing, but by going to work to make things better for all of us. Keep up the great work that you're doing, and God bless you. And I've been joined on the floor by the Majority Leader. Before I yield the floor, let me just say to another person who's joined us, my colleague from New Hampshire, who is the ranking Democrat on the Appropriations Subcommittee for Homeland Security. You and the chairman, former Governor Hoeven, Chairman Senator Hoeven now, do a wonderful job. supporting the Department of Homeland Security. And on behalf of Melissa and Tito and all the hundreds of thousands of people who work with them at the Department of Homeland Security, thank you for being there for them. Thank you.